I think we all know the most dreaded words to hear on any road trip. Do y'all think y'all can do it with me? Are we there yet?
Oh, I thought it was, I need to use the bathroom.
Are we? Yes,
No.
please.
Are we there yet?
Is there a Buc-ee's?
I thought it was, are there red lights behind us?
No. Now, are we there yet is an understandable question on any road trip. The reason you're on a journey is to reach that final destination. The process of getting there, it's never the most fun part. But without the journey, you can't reach the destination. People do many things to get there faster, take shortcuts, speeding, refusing to make pit stops. On a road trip, these things might get you there faster, but they run the risk of endangering those with you on the journey, getting you in trouble, or maybe even, if you take a wrong turn, getting lost. My name is Tyler Loy, and this panel discussion is part of my doctoral portfolio at Liberty University. Problem that I seek to resolve through this panel discussion is that First Assembly of God North Little Rock lacks a practical training program for children's pastors. It's easy to rush the process just as you try to rush a road trip. As I've prepared and studied for today's discussion, I've even thought I could do this right now. Let's skip the discussions. We're gonna build a training program for children's pastors now. We're good to go. However, I know the process is an important part of the journey. Jesus knew what his plan was before he said it in Matthew 28:19-20. The Great Commission said, therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But before Jesus laid out his plan, he spent time preparing his disciples to carry out that plan. Jesus worked the process. Today's discussions takes insights from the two previous discussions we've had with this panel, what we've talked about and discussed and what we focus on. But today we're going to take the knowledge we've gained and provide a framework that First NLR can use to develop a training program or practical training program for children's pastors. Joining me once again, Dr. Jumper, Pastor Sophia Weeks, Pastor Brian Dollar, and Dr. Loy. As we've discussed in the other discussions, there will be no Q&A. And as well, if you have any questions, you can email them to me at tloy@firstnlr.com, and we will follow up. Are we there yet? No, but let's begin the process of getting there.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you before you begin.
Okay.
So I know this is semantics, but semantics are important in academia. You said God gave us the plan in the Great Commission.
I said Jesus knew the plan.
Okay, but that is not the plan. So this is an important framework for where we're going. The Great Commission is not the plan. That's the assignment. And the reason we're having this panel discussion, and we've had it for 2,000 years, is the plan of how we do it is, if the plan becomes the goal, then all we'll do, to use your analogy and metaphor, is we'll just be going in circles on the map. Because how you get there is not as important as where you're going.
It's good.
So I would just push that the goal, to use just semantics, is disciples.
And Dan Heath, in his book, Reset, he talks about what's the goal of the goal. Right. And so the goal is not to have an effective children's ministry.
Right, and in this one, if this is the plan, then what we should do is put down our microphones, and we should just go to nations, and we should just baptize people. See what I'm like?
Yeah.
It's the unpacking all of that is what you're talking about. But if you start with the wrong goal, if you have the wrong end in mind, then you create something that doesn't actually get you to where you're going.
So you're actually arguing over the introduction.
He is. He did. He just argued the introduction of my entire panel.
No, but I think it speaks to what we're going to talk about here in this session. Because here's the thing. If the goal is making amazing children's pastors.
I think you're playing semantical games.
No, but semantic is absolutely essential in this. Because then what we'll do is we'll produce ministers, but we won't create disciples.
And to argue with you once again, the goal is to create a framework for making children's pastors.
Right. And this is a targeted discussion. We're not talking about the overarching story of Scripture. We're talking about kids' ministry.
Just saying.
Kids are disciples.
So, Dr. Loy,
yes.
What key skills or mindset should every children's pastor be equipped with?
Well, now after I've heard Randy's thoughts, I'm afraid to say anything. So I do a lot of working with churches and with pastors in regards to their staff. And so I let me talk from the standpoint of what pastors are hoping their children's pastors
Okay,
are equipped
absolutely.
with, and what I hope. The biggest thing and the biggest lack is how to lead adults, how to recruit, train, and lead teams. So being great in front of kids is about 10% of a children's pastor's job. And pastors hire a children's pastor based on how amazing they can make the show on Sunday morning, but then it falls apart because they can't recruit, train, and lead teams. And so if you can't lead, it's great that you love kids. I'm glad you can make children's church a good show. But you better know how to recruit and train, or you've just guaranteed it's always going to be small and it's always going to be you up front, and you're never going to replicate yourself.
And I'm assuming you're saying that because if you get a leader that can lead teams and lead adults, they can lead people that can make the service a fun experience.
You were that person, though. That's the thing. When you came into children's ministry, you couldn't do puppetry and illusions.
I couldn't
and all
do
that.
any of it.
You could lead people.
Yes.
And that's what made you an excellent children's pastor.
And I have zero talent. And that was evidenced in kids
Any
ministry.
amens on the panel? I don't know.
And you know,
That's semantics. I completely.
So
and so I think that.
oh yes, sorry.
I've got a list.
I forgot.
I think a children's pastor today needs to know how to deal with anxiety attacks and emotional issues. So when I teach leaders, I taught 30 leaders from the Asia Pacific region this week. I taught them modified combat breathing. A children's pastor needs to know how to walk a kid through modified combat breathing. They need to know how to deal with emotions.
Can you tell us real quick what is that?
I'll teach all four of you right now. Okay, close your mouth. Now put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. And through this whole exercise, leave your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Okay? Now breathe in through your nose for 4 counts. Tongue still on the roof of the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold it for 4. Tongue still on the roof of your mouth. 3, 4. Now slowly release that breath through your mouth. You can open your mouth, tongue still on the roof for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sorry, I just saw Pastor Brian's face. And he
Brian Dollar's children's pastor was showing at that moment.
So somebody in an all-out panic attack, I can generally calm them in 4
That's interesting.
cycles of that.
That's good.
I learned that from working with victims of human trafficking. But kids need to know how to calm a kid.
A children's pastor, you're saying basically we don't have to know how to be psychologists and counselors, but we are first responders
Yes.
in an emotional situation.
We need to know how to still that moment.
Triage is what we need to learn how to do.
I think a children's pastor needs to know how to tell a story. So it's being great in front of kids is wonderful, but you need to know how to tell a story. You need to know what makes a story sticky or memorable, what parts of the story are important. That's not something that's taught in our Bible schools. Nobody ever says, here's how you tell a story.
And I was about to ask, so Pastor Sophia, did you learn any of this in Bible school?
Not at all.
And that's a problem.
And well, let me say, it's not the problem. It should not be taught at Bible school. So let me come at it from a different perspective, okay? As one who works in the deal. So when we went to Bible school,
Because remind everybody,
I helped design a master's program for the seminary, teach at the undergraduate, graduate level, Christian liberal arts school. This is a shift that I think is absolutely important. When I went to Bible school, and I don't know if your experience was the same, was you could get degrees in everything.
Oh.
It was a golden corral.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an evangelist, get a degree in evangelist, children's ministry, youth ministry, and it was a marketing tool. And the idea that expertise and skill sets mattered. But what we've discovered over time is the moment that a professor steps on campus, they lose all validity and experience for those kinds of things. So what we found is there are some basic pieces. So this is the part where my list would be different than yours.
Well, I'm not done with my list
Yeah.
yet.
Well, I'm saying
Yeah.
from the
He got
academy,
rudely
would you
interrupted.
say they don't taught those in Bible college? Because they can't teach those in Bible college. They shouldn't teach those in Bible
Pastor
college.
Well, and I
Sophia-
think that's why we're here, is because
Yeah.
they don't teach that in Bible college, and that's why we need a practical ministry training program here.
Yeah, and they need to know how to tell a story.
Exactly.
They need to know the components of an effective story. They need to know how to lead kids in prayer.
Whew.
And so often we have a great show, the service for 1 hour or however long your service is, but then that creating the authentic God connection. They need to know how to lead kids to an authentic God connection, which includes worship and prayer. Increasingly, they need to know how to utilize technology. And that's
Technology's a big
both
piece.
in the communication in front of a crowd, but that's also communication to parents. That's the check-in systems. The effective kids pastors now have all these different technical tools. They need to know how to work in teams. They need to how to be a good team member. It's great that they need to recruit, train, and lead teams, but if a church can have a children's pastor, that means it also has other pastors.
Yeah.
Or pastor. And so they need to learn what it means to work with and work inside a team.
So is your list done? I'm sorry.
That's my list.
Okay. So,
Oh, wait, I have one more.
okay.
And then the last one is they need a basic understanding. They don't have to be a licensed counselor or have an MSW, but they need to know how to counsel parents and families. When the parent comes to Sophia and says, my husband's having an affair and my kids are acting out, will you talk to him? They need to be armed with the tools to know how to do it. They don't have to be, like I said, they don't have to be a licensed counselor, but they need to be able to have the conversation with the kids and the parents.
Okay. So, Pastor Brian, how do you feel we go about accomplishing learning these things? Because as Dr. Jumper said, university shouldn't and doesn't currently.
And can't.
So how should we go about hitting these type of things?
I think the best place is in the laboratory of the local church and being partnered with a mentor who has gone through each one of these things and learned them and can pass them on in a Paul and Timothy sort of way. Living the ministry life with someone who is accomplished at least several years ahead of you in the journey is one of the best ways for you to internalize a lot of these skills. When I came here almost 26 years ago, I had zero ability to think in a systems way. People systems, teaching, any type of true, this builds on this, builds on this, that was not. I was ultra creative and everything was spontaneous and there was no system whatsoever in the way that I did it. But by partnering with Pastor Rod and him evaluating and me asking for feedback and literally every time, I know that's a word we don't use around here
We have a
much,
rule. You're not supposed to say literally unless you literally mean it.
But I did mean literally every time I spoke in front of adults, I had him look at it and we minute by minute evaluated everything I did. And it was so that I could increase in my communication skills and eliminate a lot of very distracting habits that I had. Well, that same type of experience in just about every ministry skill would be so much more effective if we had a mentor that was willing to speak into our lives like that. And I think that local church mentor was what's going to help a lot of our ministries become
what's
that.
the balance, though, between reading, teaching, standing up in front, lecture style, or one-on-one discussion versus experience? Is there a balance to that? Is one more valid than the other? Should we not do one? What's the balance?
No, I mean, I think what Dr. Jumper was referring to is there's a time and place for both. I think our Bible colleges should focus on what they do best, which is teaching philosophical and theological things that you should incorporate into your ministry life. But then when it comes to practicality, he's right. As soon as somebody becomes a professor, they're no longer in the field doing the work. And we are in a world that changes so rapidly that you can't keep up if you're on an academic campus and you're not weekly working with the people. You're not going to keep up with the way that children especially are learning and developing. It's just impossible.
So, Pastor Sophia, you're...
I think Randy's about to disagree. Let's hear it.
No, I would
say that in the microphone, Pastor Ron.
I just thought I saw
Not
a look
talking
on
in your
Randy's
mic.
face. I was
Well,
like, bring it.
So I'm going to speak to us for a second.
Well, we're the only ones here.
Right, and I'm saying this context, because a lot of times we've been talking big picture stuff for us. To answer your question, there has to be a systematic approach as opposed to a haphazard approach. So
Okay.
as the individual who's worked with training future ministers in our context.
Because you lead our training center
So
for
for-
pastors here at the church.
I read their reports. I read, this is what I learned this week. And specifically in the kid ministry area, I would say it is a great haphazard approach to learning. Let me explain what I mean that, not in a negative term.
No.
Is almost always in our environment, we teach what we are currently reading now. Because it's fresh, it's convenient, it's easy for us. And it's in our mind and it's our heart. When we shifted a few years ago to the 11 books model, for example, we identified for a future staff member, these are the kinds of books they want to read. That so helped create a knowledge base. So I would come back to you and say the answer is, which one is it? Is I would push and say, if you're wanting to create ministers for children's ministry, then you guys should put together, and I know we don't like the word curriculum, but you should create a learning path to accomplish these things. Because what your list is spectacular, but if there is, that's what I'm talking about, the assignment and plan. That's where I was going with that.
He's back to the introduction now.
But I mean, that's the point. If
Yeah.
you say, I need them to have emotional intelligence, then you better have at some point in that 3-year journey that's specifically targeted to approach it. Which is why Bible schools do spiritual formation and biblical training. Because we can do those and control those, and then the practical side happens. Your biggest probably on the future for ministerial training is, I think Bible colleges are going to go away eventually. I think the church-based model is going to, for ministerial training, seems to be expanding quickly, at least in the Assemblies of God it is.
To summarize what I think you're saying, is because as you're discussing, Pastor Rod has a book of, a list of books he wants prospective staff members to have read and have in their heart and in their minds. And what you're saying is we should take that same approach and have, for children's pastors, a list of books that they should know and have in their hearts and their minds and help set them up with that knowledge base.
For future missionaries, in our program, they have a system set of readings. They have contacts inside of missions that they're supposed to speak to. It's weekly, monthly, semesterly reports. Pastoral leaders and those people, there are books on preaching that they're required. It's centric to what they sense their assignment is.
So I've now been pastor for 4 months.
So you're an expert.
You're an
You're better than the rest of us,
No.
clearly.
And
You've made less mistakes than anyone else on the stage.
Praise the Lord.
So there you go.
And I didn't have the hands-on practical ministry training experience to the degree that I think you're speaking of in this setting. I think, yes, we should have books that we read and need to have in our heart. But I think a lot of the learning that is so necessary for being a pastor is hands-on in everything. So I worked in our kids ministry 6 years prior to becoming pastors, and I mainly worked in our service, our main weekend service. So now, whenever I'm in every area, I only know so much. And I can only help the connections class teachers so much. And we talk about it in the Reset book, you need to go and see the work. And so I think if we're going to create a curriculum, it needs to be this week, you're doing the service, but this week you're in the small group setting. And this week, or however long the time period is, you're doing hands-on, maybe training with other kids or with other volunteers. So I think it needs to be incredibly hands-on and, yes, less haphazard, and to where we have a plan.
And
Well, and Sophia's just starting as a pastor.
Correct.
So one of her assignments is, in every meeting, she sits beside me. And when I whisper my reflections on what's happening in the meeting or what's happening in the room. And so I'll turn to her and say, when you say it like that, you alienate some of the room. That's because he's insecure. So I'm teaching her as we go. That's an ongoing process. That just doesn't end when you get the pastor in front of your name.
so,
That's an ongoing process.
so Pastor Sophia, as you said, you've been a part of our church, you've been a part of our children's ministry. And if we had developed something prior, this is a training program for children's pastors, you would have gone through this. You kind of stumbled along in the journey with us. So what do you feel like now that you're a pastor and now you've arrived at that moment? And I understand the learning journey is continual.
You've arrived. Congratulations.
prominent.
Can I say-
Prominent pastor.
All hail Sophia.
But you've become a pastor. What were our misses? What were the things that you wish we would have spent more time teaching and training you? What are the misses that we had in helping prepare you to be a children's pastor?
Good question.
Yeah. So I think the summer before I started, I did an internship. I had training from a whole church perspective. Loved it. Great. Something that you need to learn. But I think you need a whole kids ministry perspective if you're going to work in kids ministry. And so I kind of touched on it, but knowing the processes for every single person that is there is so essential, because now you're the point person. If something goes wrong, you have to fix it. Our sound went wrong the other week, and I don't know how to fix a soundboard. Now I'm learning the processes, I'm learning how to do lights, I'm learning, all of the things. But if I were to go through an internship or a training program before, then I'd already have the basis, and I wouldn't just be kind of guessing
So you're saying
as I'm in leading.
Not just how to communicate better with kids, not interacting with kids, or not even necessarily just leading leaders, but really the learning the ministry as a whole, and even down to the level of how a teacher teaches their classroom or how the sound guy turns on and fixes
Yes.
the sound system.
And I think that, of course, the speaking directly to children is essential. But I got that as part of my training. That was the only thing I got. Though.
Yeah.
So
So-
I'm missing the other pieces.
So Dr. Parker, who's on our team, he and I have been having the same conversation. And first of all, I want to undo what I said a while ago for it's going to sound like it. But what we just described is we want you to create savants. And that is unrealistic and unhelpful. So if we think in the terms of production of a minister, we should have a whole lot more grace and space for Sophia when she comes. So I would just say back to you as one of the leaders in your life for a second, you should release yourself from the expectation of knowing how to fix the lights or every component, because your list is a massive journey plus my list, plus I'm sure every one of us brought a list. I'm struck. This is what Pastor Parker and I had the conversation. A medical residency is 3 to 7 years.
Yeah.
So they have all the theory, all the learning how to fix stuff, but you can't do your own thing until you are 7 in some things.
Yeah.
So, but in not necessarily in our context, but in most contexts, I'm sure yours back there is congratulations, you're pastor. Here are the keys to the church van. Here are the code to the alarm. We need you to go visit people this weekend. Like,
Yeah, and it'd be akin to saying, congratulations, you've graduated from medical school.
Or
go do a tonsillectomy.
Or, no, actually, or brain surgery.
Yes.
Because my first ever position in a church, the first Sunday that I was a youth pastor, the very first Sunday, the pastor looked at me and introduced to me a 13-year-old girl who had been impregnated by a family member. That was my first Sunday. I was 21 years old, and I was like, what I'm saying is, we can't have all of the competencies for our initial hire, but you should help us identify what are the core ones, and then a process for mentoring and training.
And I could also say that one of the issues, and I'll get right to you, Pastor Sophia, but not only is it, here's the keys, do it. For the ones that don't have any training, sometimes it's, I can't find a job because they want somebody that can do it.
Right.
And that's part of the difficulties too, is there's such a need for children's pastors, but yet we don't have a way to get them children's pastor ready like some of the churches want. So, Pastor Sophia, were you wanting to say something?
Well, and that's just where the team comes in. Like, we are currently
Yeah.
co-kids pastors. I don't know how to fix the sound, but you did. Praise the Lord. So that's why a team is so necessary, but I do think it's essential to have some information coming in.
Quick, just Dr. Jumper, how long is your ministry training center program?
So
For the average student.
I'm going to argue with what we have because I think it's good. So we partner with, for the majority of our students, partner with a Christian university to provide the biblical theological training that we do some coaching alongside. Secondly, we design a curriculum each semester that they're involved. We call that a practicum. You might use the word residency, core competencies, learning journey, spiritual maturity, formation, and then whole church perspective. And then they move to a localized ministry piece. So if you're called to, if you feel like you work with youth ministry, then you go work with youth ministry. You work with kids ministry, you go there. Music ministry, you go do music. I think 3 years in the when I would say the classroom setting,
Yeah.
I think that's about the max for most people to handle. But it's a 4-year program, but I think 3 is where we run out of, it starts losing its steam for that individual.
So, Dr. Rod, last question. Hearing our thoughts and everything, you are a leader and you guide us. Is your thought that if we develop a practical training program for children's pastors, should it be along with a university study, or should it be separate?
I'm always going to default to that you also need the university study. You need the biblical theological foundation.
I'm going to rephrase my question. I'm not saying that's not important to have that side of things. What I'm asking is, should we do like what Dr. Jumper does, where the training happens while they're doing the focused biblical studies?
Got you.
Or should it, I've finished, I'm going to go somewhere for 6 months and learn, and then go be a pastor on my
I
own?
think my answer is yes. I think it should be both. I think they should be doing that while they learn, and then ideally, when someone comes up and says, I've gone through school, I've graduated, I've got the theological and the biblical background, I want to be children's pastor, I've spent time learning some competencies. Now I think they should have that final piece where they are doing it alongside someone who's doing
Having
it.
a mentor.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a 3-year residency But even if you just spend 6 months
Just
learning,
someone to learn.
just
Well,
someone to learn
It
from.
feels like for it to be truly effective, you'd want to go through the full year cycle of a church.
Full calendar.
'Cause
You need a
got-
minimum of a
You
year.
got Easter, Christmas, and summer camps and all that stuff.
And-
children's pastor needs to know how to handle
And really, what I think we're getting at is it needs to look like what I'm doing with Pastor Sophia right now, but more systematic and planned and prepared. And I think the thoughts we've had today, as discussing, it's great insight on to what children's pastors should be equipped with, what they should learn, and we've had some fun arguments along the journey. But I think we have moved forward and are moving towards a solution to provide training for children's pastors. So thank you all for being a part. Thank you for your time and your faithfulness to the ministry. And thank you all for watching and joining us today. We hope that you gained as much as we did too. Have a good day.